America the Beautiful is a real definition of what our campaign stands for. Our country is a blessing. Please don't believe everything that you hear on television, because if you listen to the media, you would say that people hate our country. That is absolutely not true. As I crisscross the state and I talk to the citizens of South Carolina, it hits me like a ton of bricks. Whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, people are passionate about their state. People are passionate about their country. They love their country. It is a very small minority of people that want to destabilize America. The Democratic Socialists want to destabilize our country so that they can come in and rescue us and set up a totalitarian style of government. And we can never let that happen. America is a democratic republic. And when the Founding Fathers met in Philadelphia and they talked about what kind of government do we want, socialism wasn't even a blip on their radar screen. It was all about we the people. That is what a democratic republic is about. It's about we the people. We decide. We elect representatives who in turn represent us in Congress and in other local and state area government. So it's we the people. That's what our government is all about. And we've got to be mindful of that. We have an American distinctiveness. Our American distinctiveness started, 253 years ago? And it started with a Bible-focused, it started with a focus on morality, it started with a focus on ethics and good Bible principles. And if you think about it, here's the difference. Years ago, there was a Christian consensus.
Amen.
Well, so what does that mean? Well, it means that there were believers, and then there were non-believers. But years ago, those non-believers said, well, I may not agree with those folks. They're kind of weird, those Christians. But what they're saying is right on. That was a Christian consensus. Today, what do we have? We have Christians, and then we have non-Christians. But do those non-Christians look at us and say, that's the way that I want to go? I think for the most part, we know the answer. We see it on TV. We see it in America. There is not a Christian consensus. And while we do not ever want to establish a state-sponsored church, that's not what we're all about. We're about religious freedom. And that is the First Amendment to our Constitution. And lo and behold, it's the first thing that they talk about, religious freedom. But when Jefferson talked about the Establishment Clause and not wanting to establish a state-sponsored religion, the next thing that he talked about, it was called the Free Exercise Clause. He wanted to make sure that as Americans, we could freely exercise our religious beliefs. Now, he did not say, well, I want you to exercise your religious beliefs in private only. No. What Jefferson said is that he wanted to make sure that we could exercise our religious freedom wherever we were, whether it's private, whether it's in public. We need to be bold in the way that we exercise our religious freedom. And then the last part of what Jefferson said, thus creating separation of church and state. So if you read it in context, the establishment, the Free Exercise Clause, thus creating separation of church and state, what Jefferson was saying is that he wanted to protect we the people from the government, not the other way around. He wanted to protect our religious freedom. because we need protection from an overreaching government. That is part of what our American distinctiveness is all about. When we go back to the traditional and the historical roots of America, what do we see? We see the founding fathers in the Federalist Papers making it very, very clear what they expected from government. And they even went to the point where the words that they used, when they talked about states' rights and what the state was capable of doing and their role, it was a great big capital S. States, we the people. And when they talked about the federal world, the federal government, you think it was by chance, but there was just a little letter F. It was not capitalized. I think that they understood that we the people was about small government. And that is part of our American distinctiveness. We're Christian. We're focused on the morality and ethics. We're focused on common human decency. We're focused on what the Bible says about marriage between a man and a woman. We're focused on what the Bible says, that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. Our party, the Republican Party, is not here trying to redefine human existence itself. Because when you do that, what do? You fall right in line with the secular humanists and their manifestos 1, 2, and 3. And you fall right in line with a Marxist, Leninist, totalitarian kind of government, which, i.e., communism. And if you take secular humanism and you look at it, study the tactics, you study the strategy of secular humanism, and you overlay that with totalitarianism, with their strategy and their tactics, you will come to the conclusion that it is basically the same. Secular humanism is a religion, and totalitarianism is a political ideology. But it's all the same, because what it wants to do is control every facet of your life. That is democratic socialism. That's the first rung on the ladder of totalitarianism. So the first rung is this. We live in a democratic republic, and we have Republicans and Democrats. Well, the Democrats, liberalism. I mean, that's the first rung, okay? They're still playing by the rules. Well, the next rung is called progressivism. And there was a lifelong Democrat that was in the cabinet of Ronald Reagan. Her name was Jean Kirkpatrick. And you know what she said about that next rung on that ladder towards totalitarianism? She said that progressivism, now this is, again, a lifelong Democrat who was in Reagan's cabinet. She said progressivism is a plague on the Democratic Party. Fast forward 25 years. It is a plague on our country, on our state. And then that next rung in the ladder, of course, which I think we're very, very close to, is when democratic socialism becomes mainstream. And we can look at the senator from Vermont, and we can see that it's become mainstream. When a democratic, self-proclaimed democratic socialist can almost get the Democratic nomination in the United States of America, we have to admit that we are on that third rung. We're almost there. And we've got to stop it. We've got to do, as Republicans, we've got to do everything we can to stop the tide of democratic socialism. I would just dare say, if Ronald Reagan was our president any time in the late 90s, early 2000s, I dare say that he would have had his foot on the throat of democratic socialism. He would have shouted similar a phrase, and I'm not sure what that phrase would have been, but I'll tell you what. Remember the phrase, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall? Well, Ronald Reagan would have had something to say about the democratic, socialist, and all of what's going on right now. Because that is not America in my book. It's not. What we need is we need a focus on tradition. We need a focus on common human decency. We need a focus on godly standards, morality and ethics, and we need to let freedom ring. And we need to let it ring, starting with religious freedom, because I believe if we are free with our religion, I believe it starts there and then it cascades down all of the other legislative issues, all of the laws. If we start with religious freedom, then I think we're going to be okay. And that was where we are. And let me circle back to what I just said a few minutes ago. That was where we were 250 years ago. We had the Bible front and center of our country. And then over here we had church leadership, and then we had the local body. But the Bible was here, right? It's driving our country on the, let's call it the ecclesiastical side. And then over on the government side, the Bible still front and center. And we had our national government, and we had our state government, and then we had the local precincts, we the people. But the Bible was front and center, driving our politics. That's not happening today. We are espousing to a European model. And here it is. We've taken the Bible front and center, and we put it over here on the shelf. And so the Bible is still impacting churches. But the question is the Bible having the impact on the government side that it used to? And I would say this, and this is my contention, like the European model, what you're seeing is secular humanism driving our government. The Bible is over here. It's no longer in the middle, driving both sides. Secular humanism is driving our government. And ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ, secular humanism has been defined by the Supreme Court of the United States of America as a religion. It's driving our public schools. Secular humanism, this religion, the tenets, the doctrine of secular humanism is driving our public schools and thus many of our future leaders. And we've got to do everything that we can to combat that. We've got to step up, get busy, and get out and mobilize people. Mobilize freedom cells across this country that believe in the traditional, the historical, the moral, and for my dollar, the biblical foundation of our country. That will be American distinctiveness. Thank you.